Dear friends, I am Dr. Urmi Satyan, faculty at the Department of Languages, Literature and Aesthetics, School of Liberal Studies, PDPU, Gandhinagar. The topic for today's discussion is Tradition and the Individual Talent by T.S Eliot. The essay Tradition and Individual Talent was first published in The Egoist in 1919 and was reprinted in The Sacred Wood in 1920 and in Selected Essays in 1932. At the outset of the essay, Eliot differentiates between words like tradition and traditional. He says that the proper noun tradition conveys the point of history that is limited to that particular time, whereas the adjectival noun traditional conveys the motion of the tradition along with the time. The adjectival noun traditional is used initially as a phrase of censure and later, with the passing of time, it gets approval, though the approval may be vague. But in any case, the adjectival noun traditional does not work as a parameter to appreciate any writer, dead or living. The reason behind this is that we easily forget the creative talent or shortcomings of writers. Eliot says we have a habit of jumping to conclusion as we are surrounded by the enormous mass of critical writing. He advises us to have a thorough exposure to the primary text to reach a just conclusion. Eliot is ironical when he says that for some readers, criticism is as inevitable as breathing. In such criticism or praise, the reader actually pretends to find what is individual and what is the peculiar essence of a writer. The reader sometimes reads poetry in isolation and forgets to pay attention to its roots in the past, and in so doing, the reader excludes the impression of the previous age and reads poetry for personal joy. These readers miss out the parts that carry the impressions of the dead poets who assert their immortality most vigorously. Does Eliot want to advise us to read poetry in the light of historical background? Yes. Reading without contextual clarity is not a complete reading. We can say that there should be a satisfaction of Purnam Idam at the end of the reading of a poem. Eliot explains that historical background is not the blind or timid adherence to tradition. He strongly says that traditions that influence the just reading should be positively discouraged and novelty should be respected over repetition. As the proverbial line says, change is the only constant. Eliot says tradition involves historical sense that is timeless as well as temporal. It means that any past that hinders the progress of the present should not be encouraged. No poet, no artist has his complete meaning alone. So, the appreciation or criticism that is attached to a poet or poetry is applicable, maybe slightly, to the ancestral source of knowledge. This is more a principle of aesthetics than any rule of historical criticism. Further in his essay, Eliot discusses what is conformity between the old and the new. He says, unless some new work arrives, the existing work is believed to be complete. But when the new work arrives, it certainly alters, at least slightly, the existing order of art or literature, and so the relations, proportions, values of each work of art are also readjusted. For a poet's relation to the past, Eliot says, the poet needs to be conscious of the main existing and eternal truth that art never improves, but that the material of art is never quite the same. Eliot also says that much learning deadens or perverts poetic sensibility. Learning from the past must work as the source of knowledge and not as emulation. He then tells us that Shakespeare draws the source of historical knowledge from his predecessor Plutarch and not from any British museum. In Indian context, we can say that Swami Vivekananda procures the spiritual knowledge from his guru Ramakrishna Paramhans and continues to develop it as per the demand of the time and then shares it throughout the world. Eliot himself nurtured appreciation for the metaphysical poets. Thus, knowledge from past is to inspire and not to emulate. Here, the process of depersonalization is seen in relation to the sense of tradition. In the process of depersonalization, art develops a scientific approach. The second part of the essay is more about honest criticism and sensitive appreciation. Eliot says a mature poet depersonalizes himself from the traditions and not from the wisdom taken from it. Such mature poets draw combinations of perfected mediums between the old and the new. He further compares the poet to a catalyst and gives an analogy from a chemistry laboratory. He says that no trace of platinum can be found when the very presence of it is crucial in producing sulfur acid out of oxygen and sulfur dioxide. The ancient learning is that platinum. That is the very reason behind the present artistic creation. Next, Eliot talks about feelings and emotions, the two major elements that govern poetry. While talking about feelings and emotions, Eliot says that feelings and emotions recollected in tranquility is an inexact formula. Friends, it is very interesting to note that Eliot here redefines Wordsworth's definition of poetry. He says it is concentration and not recollection that is more practical and active in artistic experience. To Eliot, writing a poem is a conscious and deliberate act. At the last stage of the essay, Eliot says that emotion of art is impersonal, and to reach this stage, a poet needs to completely forget his personal likes and dislikes. Dear friends, Eliot is the product of the 20th century, the century that has witnessed 2 world wars. It should not surprise us when this learned poet and critic freely quotes Shakespeare in his poem Gerontion, redefines Wordsworth's definition for poetry, and defends metaphysical poetry for the unique art of unification and dissociation of sensibility. That is it for today. Thank you very much.